Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Welcome to this series on form drawing. Today I'm sharing with you the book called Creative Form Drawing for the Four Temperaments with Children aged 6 to 12 years. This is workbook number 3 and this is by Angela Lord. But I do want to share with you some of the other books that I have in this series. This is Creative Form Drawing workbook number 1. This is also by Angela Lord. We also have Creative Form Drawing. This is workbook 2 for children aged 10 to 12. This is also by Angela Lord. This is a continuation of workbook number 1. And I also have Movement Drawing Workbook by Lee Sturgeon Day. So if you're interested in seeing any of these other form drawing books, I highly encourage you to check out the whole series. You can find the link to the playlist as well as to the blog post in the description box below. All right, so let's get started. Today we are going to be exploring creative form drawing for the Four Temperaments. This is for children ages 6 to 12, but honestly, I think this is for adults as well. I know that when it says for younger children or for school age children, this is so that teachers and homeschoolers or any kind of educator can use these within a classroom setting or within a home setting for their children. What I love about this book is that it's going to go through the four temperaments. So even if you sort of know about them but don't know too much about them, this book is going to give you a really great overview with tips on both the positive aspects of these temperaments as well as some of the challenges, because this creative form drawing book is going to help specifically with those challenges of those particular temperaments, children with these temperaments, which again I think can work well with adults. So what this book is going to start out with is a very quick overview of the human being. And so this is, in my opinion, a Waldorf perspective on looking at the human being. These words tend to be used within the Waldorf world, but they relate to things that are universal. And so the first thing is that everyone has a physical body. It is part of the human experience is to have a physical human body. We also have our etheric body, and that is what gives us life. It permeates the entire physical body, and it is what, in a sense, animates all of our life. And it is very distinct when someone passes, how that body, how different that body appears when the life forces are no longer within that body. The etheric body is also responsible for the willing, for the movement. It is the forces that allow you to do. The next body is the astral body, and we can think of this body in a sense as the mediator between our etheric body and our physical body. So the astral body is what feels all of the feelings, and so that's that pleasure or pain or sympathy or antipathy, the likes and dislikes. We're all responding to the sensations, and that's what this paragraph goes over that in great detail so that you can really understand the differences between each of these bodies. Each of them are within the other. You don't have a physical body that's alive without the etheric, and you don't have the etheric body without the astral body. So the astral body is the astral body processes all of our sensations. So we have our sense of touch and our hearing and our sight and our taste and our smell. And these are how we process the world around us. And then our astral body takes in all of these senses, and we may like a particular food or dislike a particular food. We may like the warmth of a sunny day, or we may like the snow, the cold of a winter day. And so, or we may like the smell, like there's particular candle smells that you might really like, or things that you don't like. So all of these senses take in the world around us and process it. So our astral body is responsible for this part of our human existence, and it connects our etheric body to our physical body. And it is also responsible for our feelings. So this is this is where the astral body comes in. So then we have our ego, or the I, and that is responsible for our thinking. And this is unique to each person. No one can call someone else I. We can only call ourselves I. And that is really special and unique. So even though we may have similarities and we share so many qualities, but no one can be me. No one can be you. You are unique and I am unique. And that is the I. That is our consciousness. That is what makes us individual as human beings. So these are the 4 parts, the 4 different bodies, and each has a development and each has a birth and a lifespan of development. And these follow the 7-year developmental cycles. So now we're going to look at the 4 temperaments and actually how they came about. This is what chapter 2 is going to talk about. So I'm going to briefly explain that the temperaments, as the examples are in the Waldorf pedagogy, are based on some ancient teachings, and they originated in more of the health and well-being in a medicinal perspective. Originally, when we looked at types of foods or medicines that could help balance the humors in a person, we needed to know which humors were out of balance so that we would know how to bring harmony and balance within them. So that's where the names of these temperaments, choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic, originated from, and how each of them relates to a particular function of the body. In chapter 3, we're going to talk about the different temperaments and the characteristics, and what I love most, because it's going to be what this book is about, is balancing those temperaments, balancing aspects of a particular temperament that may need a little bit more harmony. So when we're looking at the temperaments, we're looking at something that is dynamic, that is fluid, that will change over time when you're looking at children versus adults. And what I love about the dynamic quality of temperaments is that, unlike personality types, which tend to be a little bit more rigid, in my opinion, temperaments are meant to be seeking balance between the 4. So while we are all 4 temperaments, choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic, we tend to have one that's dominant, 2 more that are sort of competing for second place, and one that we think we just do not relate to that temperament at all. So we tend to have a dominant and 2 more that really support that quite a bit, and then one that we may have some aspects of that temperament, but not so much. And I want to take a moment now to divert from this just to say something that's a reflection that I've had over the years of understanding temperaments, is that firstly, children have a temperament that will be transformed when they hit puberty. Many things change at this particular 7-year developmental marker. So we have the birth to 7 years is a very important developmental time period, which is marked by the change of teeth. Then you have from 7 to 14. These are rough estimates because these developmental cycles do change a little bit with each person. They are informed by different physical or mental changes. So there are going to be some differences in the particular ages. But for the sake of the 7-year cycle, I'm just going to use 0 to 7 and 7 to 14, and then 14 to 21, and so on. And each one is marked by a different awakening or awareness or reflection or perspective that you have as you hit these different 7-year cycles. And so if you are approaching one, or you're in the middle of one, or you've just passed one, then you'll know, like, say, plus or minus, say, 2 years to that 7-year cycle, then you'll probably reflect on your own experience and see a big shift in either your mental or emotional understanding. I love how it goes into the spiritual as well. And then when you're younger, you'll see those physical changes more, but there are specific milestones, even as older adults where you can see very specific physical milestone changes as well. So when you're looking at puberty at around 14, let's say, that's a very strong physical milestone. There's huge physical changes that happen at puberty. There is also a shift in a person's temperament, and there is a cycle of the temperament. So depending on which aspect of the four parts of the human body are dominant in your childhood, then that particular temperament will be dominant. So for instance, there's the physical, etheric, astral, and the I, and there are different parts of the body that relate to each of those. So and different elements. So you have like earth, wind, fire, and water, and each of those are associated to the different temperaments. And then you have, like, say, your bones, your glandular system, your nervous system, and like your blood. Those are also going to relate to the different temperaments as well. So depending on what is dominant in childhood, you will have one temperament for that, which will then change to a different temperament as an adult. And so, it goes a bit through like a cycle. Like if you see the temperaments in a chart, for instance, and you just shift them over one side, that's what you will notice, the temperament change from childhood to adulthood. So you have this huge shift at puberty where that temperament that you might have sort of had as a child, now as an adult, your temperament changes and really becomes you, really settles into you. So still on my tangent before we get back to the book, here's my reflection on what I've noticed throughout my experience with temperaments. The first thing, there are certain characteristics that children will have that they will have from the time they are born, literally, probably in utero even, that they will have throughout their whole entire life. I feel like that is something very specific to an individual. Then there is the temperament that you will have as a child that will be different than what you will have as an adult. And that marked difference occurs at puberty. You will also have stages of life development where a particular temperament, you're like, for instance, in that temperament of life. So sanguine is the temperament of childhood. So even if you are choleric or phlegmatic or melancholic, as a child, you're still in your sanguine period of life, followed by your choleric period of life when you are youth and young adult, and you might be more dedicated to working on your career or more goal-oriented in that life, in that period of your lifetime, followed by your phlegmatic and melancholic in your older age when things start to slow down a little bit more. And you might have a melancholic stage when you're reflecting on your life and there's a bit of grief as you say goodbye to these stages of your life. And a friend of mine remarked that right around puberty, you go through a little mini melancholic stage right around puberty, which I have seen very specifically with 2 out of 4 of my children. And the way that it sort of came to the surface or manifested right around puberty, right in the maybe year or so before puberty hit, there was this reflection on their childhood, their particular childhood, and wanting to revisit some of the things they did as children, and realizing that as they revisited those things, there wasn't the same joy or the same experience. And it was quite a melancholic event. It was a very sad event as they are recognizing changes happening in their body, in their physical, in their mental, in their spiritual, emotional, that the things that brought them joy or those experiences that they had before have now started to go away. And there was this moment of trying to revisit that before they actually went into adulthood. So there's that little melancholic period right before that transition, or right during that transition before they are fully adults. So what I've noticed is that as an adult, as I have reflected on my own temperament and have understood it better, I've realized two things. One is that when you have, say, something like anxiety or controlling behavior or a temper or any kind of diagnosis in, say, a mental illness, or something that's close to something that's a mental illness. And I would even refer, so depression, anxiety, certain aspects of controlling behavior, narcissism, those kinds of things. What I've noticed is that there are some cases where those are so polarizing, you need medical help and you need medication. So I'm going to put those aside, but I'm going to look at other qualities that are maybe not quite as severe. When you have those qualities, or those challenges, I should say rather, it will not give you a good view of what your temperament actually is, and it can complicate your harmony within your four temperaments, and it can also exacerbate certain qualities of your temperament that maybe are ones that you need to work on. So in order to really find harmony and balance within your temperaments, you do need to work through some of those challenges ahead of time. Separately, I would like to say that for some of your temperaments, and I would say phlegmatic in particular, I'll talk about phlegmatic because I have most experience with that in particular, is that for the phlegmatic, for instance, emotions tend to be really deep inside the phlegmatic. They're not as surface as the other temperaments. And we often associate a emotional as a quality, but actually all the temperaments are emotional. There isn't just one temperament that's emotional. However, the emotions that are expressed are different depending on the temperament. So you may have a choleric temperament expressing anger and frustration more easily than other temperaments, and you will have the sanguine temperament expressing joy and excitement more easily than the other temperaments, and you will have the melancholic temperament expressing grief and sadness more easily than the other temperaments. And then you have the phlegmatic, where the emotions are quite deep and it takes a lot for them to come up to the surface. And I've noticed that, particularly in my life, that as I have hit certain events, and primarily this would be grief events, so a death, a passing, a change, when I have encountered those events, that has sort of opened and unlocked the door to the melancholic, and it's allowed me to have access to what the melancholic probably has access to easily and often through that life experience. So through life experience, I feel like you can unlock aspects of these different temperaments that maybe were not so easily accessible before. And that's the same for all the temperaments, is that unlocking those different doors allows you to go more fluidly into those temperaments and embrace some of those qualities of the other temperaments that you may not have had. What we would not want to have is you embracing qualities in the other temperaments that are not positive. So for instance, and actually, you know what? I want to take that back for a moment because every quality has a positive aspect to it. But let's take one like impatience. Impatience is usually seen as a negative quality. However, there are many instances where impatience is actually a positive quality. So impatience for justice can be a positive quality. If you are just so patient and justice is not coming and so much trial is happening and people are being harmed and hurt because you are not working towards justice or towards resolution, then being patient in those particular instances is not going to be as good of a quality as being impatient for justice, where you're working dedicatedly for that justice, as an example, for instance. So when you're looking at these temperaments, you can look at some of the aspects where, well, impatience is not a good quality. Well, however, actually, let's reframe that and say impatience is good in this aspect, but it's not good in other aspects. So for instance, impatient in driving, and let's call that road rage for a moment. We want to find more patience in that particular situation, because being impatient in driving can then be calamitous. You can get in a car accident, or that can stress out everyone else in the car. So there are aspects of your temperament that you want to work on. And then there are aspects, those very same aspects that you want to channel into positive scenarios. Okay, so chapter 3 is going to go over the choleric temperament. And so some of the aspects of the choleric temperament are that they have a very strong will. They can be willful and eager to do things. They can maybe be a little bit bossy, but they have really great leadership qualities. But those leadership qualities need to be supported and honed so that they are positive, or they're good leaders rather than dictators. So when you're looking at the qualities of the choleric, you can also see that they need some balance. So when then there's a sanguine, phlegmatic, and the melancholic. But let me jump to what the form drawing might look like for these temperaments. So for the choleric temperament, which you're going to see forms that are equal and opposite from the phlegmatic, is that you are looking to contain some of that energy. And so putting circles or boundaries around that strong center is going to help bring balance to that choleric child. So the key principles for the choleric forms is the center is strong and dominant and clearly defined, and the outer form surrounds it harmoniously and helps to contain it. Okay, so let's move on to the sanguine temperament. The sanguine children, they are astral in nature. So I forgot to tell you that for the choleric, the blood is what's that dominates the heat. They tend to be warm and hot almost for the choleric temperament. For the sanguine, you can see the air quality, the lungs, the nervous system. They're quick-witted, they're optimistic, they're happy. They make friends easily, but they also drop friends just as easily. They are so full of ideas. You may know a sanguine in your life, and she has this idea this week and this idea the next week, but doesn't have a lot of follow-through. And so the sanguine, when you look at the forms for the sanguines, you're looking at forms. Let me go to class 1. You're looking at forms where you have some repetition, you have some change. So you can see like in the center or on the sides, you have some change, but you're really working to help that student complete the form and to stay with the form and not to get distracted and to really persevere through that form so that they can start to come and settle into that consistency, because sanguine students or sanguine children or even adults tend to get easily aroused and just as easily distracted. They go from one project to the next. And so we want to settle them down just a little bit, bring them down to earth just a little bit, and have them stick with a form just a little bit longer to help balance out that temperament. The next is the phlegmatic temperament, and that's where the etheric body is strong. Phlegmatic children tend to be sociable, they tend to be reliable, they tend to work diligently on their projects until they're done. They may have a little trouble getting started, but once they get started, they're very good at finishing. They like their comfort. They don't like discomfort. They don't like conflicts. They want harmony, and they tend to avoid problems and conflicts by being people pleasers or just going with the flow in order to avoid conflicts. So let's jump to the phlegmatic forms so that we can see what they might look like. So these forms are drawn in a sequence, and they always begin the form on the left side, moving to the right. And the key principle for the phlegmatic forms is that the outer form disappears, leaving the inner form to stand independently and actively on its own strength. Because the phlegmatics tend to be slower than the sanguines and the cholerics. And that slowness means that they'll typically allow someone who's a little bit faster to do the tasks that are really intended for the phlegmatic. But because they're a little bit slower, someone who might be impatient like a choleric, or someone like a sanguine who's just so quick at doing things, will end up doing the tasks of the phlegmatic. So we want to really bring that energy to the phlegmatic for them to initiate what they would otherwise leave to someone else. And so you can see these forms. They start from the left, they're drawn to the right. For these forms, we are the transforming principles of these forms are to appreciate harmony and balance in the surroundings. So when you're looking at a form that's contained, there's a lot of comfort in that contained form for the phlegmatic. When you release that form, that energy moves outward. And so the energy that the choleric has naturally to move outward, we're looking to bring that to the phlegmatic, to bring a little bit more of that energy to be self-initiating, versus the choleric where you want to contain that a little bit. We don't want to change each of these temperaments. We want to help develop them so that they can be in harmony with one another. So we're looking at expansive, all-encompassing forms that seem to shrink and contract. It is no longer spreading itself out. The compact, smaller form is condensed and has an actively independent quality. And so that's what some of the transforming principles are for the phlegmatic child. And then let's finish off with the melancholic temperament. Melancholic temperament is strongly influenced by the physical body. This is the earth quality, or the bones. And you can see that in some cases, some extreme cases, you might find that some melancholic children have a really hard time controlling their bodies. However, melancholic children, or rather adults, tend to be, excuse me, on the tall side, tall, thin, striking features, even dark hair. These are some of the physical qualities you might see in the melancholic temperament. For the melancholic, you're going to see a lot of suffering and sorrow. And before the temperament is developed, you're going to see a lot of that pointed inward. So the melancholic child or adult, the adult who hasn't developed the qualities that can help balance the melancholic, they will think that they have the short end of the stick all the time. No one likes them. They never get invited to anything. They think that everything is their fault. And so they tend to internalize a lot of those qualities. However, the melancholic child and adult tend to be the deep thinkers, and these are the ones that can really dissect a poem, for instance, and really understand the deep meaning in text. And so those are some of the really good qualities that we want from the melancholic. They tend to be detail-oriented. They tend to be loyal. They tend to be goal-oriented, but different than the choleric. And they tend to be intense. So for the forms for the melancholic, and you can also see that the colors are different depending on the temperament. So really quickly, we'll go back to, you'll see some strong reds and oranges for the choleric temperament. You'll move into, there's a lot of yellow. You can see some of these softer colors for the sanguine. You tend to have greens and soft blues for the phlegmatic, and blue for the melancholic child. Now, the key principles for the melancholic forms are the inner and the outer are related in a harmonious, balanced way. You'll see that the melancholic child tends to think a lot. They have intense internal thoughts. They tend to be inward. They tend to fall into themselves. And so we want to bring out that inner quality to find harmony with the outer world. We want to connect the outer world with the inner thoughts, inner feelings, inner the internalized thoughts and feelings of the melancholic child. So we want to bring harmony between the two. So we're going to have forms that help balance out that inner and that outer. Some of the transforming principles are light and darkness are both necessary. This is really important, not just for the melancholic child, but for everything, because within every temperament, you're going to see positive and negative aspects that we want to balance out. There's a natural harmony between the lightness and the darkness, just as there is harmony between day and night, and just as there can be harmony between your inner world and your outer world. So when you leave a melancholic without that development and that balance and that harmony, you will find that they become so internalized into that particular aspect that they're thinking about, that emotion, that they tend to lose connection with the outer world. So we want to bring balance between the two. And of course, with each of these temperaments, you're going to find that the form drawing becomes more detailed for each of these classes as you move from grade 1 to grade 4. I hope this was a helpful look at these resources for form drawing. I hope you'll check out the blog post that accompanies this video, where you can find more resources, links to these books, as well as other tutorials. You can find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see what we're form drawing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.